Hi all, let's look at another exciting game from the FIDE World Cup 2017. Vladimir Fedoseev was playing against Nakamura. So this is a very interesting game. Let's have a look at this. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6. We don't get a royal lopez. In fact, we get knight C3 here, and this becomes the four knights variation. You can see the four knights are out. Not very dramatically named. It's more of a statement of fact, isn't it? Bishop B5, knight D4. This is a very interesting line. I believe Capablanca used this line once or twice. Bishop C4. You can see the E5 pawn is attacked here now because black's plunged in with a knight, weakening E5. But black often plays bishop C5 here. And the point is, if white takes now on E5, he didn't, he played D3, but if white took on E5, we have queen E7, and this can actually become quite unpleasant because of this tempo gain. It's at least equal in live book. So that's not really to be feared, white taking that pawn at the moment. So white supports the E4 pawn. Now we have C6. And this kind of fundamental assumption that white shouldn't take the pawn is challenged actually here, because the usual moves are not C6. The usual move is D6, supporting the pawn here. Yeah, this is like 5 times more used than C6. Now C6, white actually did, believe it or not, take the plunge in this position to take that pawn. This is significantly different now. Black castled. If he plays queen e7, there is the possibility of being greedy with knight takes f7 after d5 just snapping off the rook, and here h3 to stop any nasties with bishop g4, bishop e6, and white should have a small advantage if nothing else. The knight's stranded, but white should be okay there. So black actually castled, and we get a really interesting move now from Fedoseev. Can you see what white played? Can you imagine what white plays in this position? And this is, like, for me, like very fresh opening territory, which we hardly ever see compared to the royal lopez. So very interesting. Okay, white took another pawn. Yeah, so he's taken out a big center pawn, and now the f pawn. He gets to get the rook. So usually this exchange, 2 minor pieces for rook, is a no-no, but he's taken out a big center pawn en route. And yeah, it's just a very interesting position. Bishop e3 now. And there are ideas like e5 and trying to dislodge this bishop, sometimes maybe even b4, but with the king in the center, these ideas are backfiring at the moment. But maybe Nakamura actually retreated the knight. Possibly d5 might be the best move. For example, h3 to stop any use of g4, and this should be okay for black. But with knight e6, white just snapped off actually on c5 and gains a tempo now on this knight. It moves back and gains a tempo on that one. Knight e6. Now white castles, and there's an intention clearly of f4 f5, which looks really a big space gain. d6 was played, trying to undermine white's center. f4, d takes, and now white was tempted to play f takes with check. Maybe even stronger is just taking it, inviting an exchange of queens with f5 on the way. This is really dangerous if black doesn't take the queens off here. I'll just give you an example. If queen b6, this is just a very big position with f5. It just looks nasty, absolutely nasty. I mean, this is just squish territory, basically. So let's assume black takes off the queens here. This didn't happen, but let's say queen takes d1. This position, white's maintaining the f pawn and ready for f5. Yeah, this position looks like a big position for white. But anyway, in the game, f takes, and it had the idea that, okay, d4 is weak, but it can be pushed. And this is the idea that actually now this can be supported. So white's still in a dominant position. Queen g4, knight f8, queen f3 threatening, queen f7 check, and a back row mate potentially after knight takes. So knight g6 was played, getting out of the firing line. Just to show that on the board, a6 check, we can see that knight takes c7, queen takes c7, queen takes f8 is mating. So yeah, the knight had to get out of the way of that. Rook ad1, it's still a massive position for white, it seems. And now h4, trying to lure the queen away from protecting d7. So if queen takes, we have check, and queen takes d7. So very, very interesting move, h4. Knight takes h4. The idea is to get this nasty pin now on d7. Very, very difficult position for black. Nakamura played a check here. I mean, what does he do, really? If he takes that knight, it's just devastation. Rook takes d7. And black would have to give up the queen, because otherwise he's getting, like, mated. Queen takes f6. Well, maybe not mated, but close. Yeah, so basically queen b6 check was played. Rook f2. Now bishop a4, this might not have been the best move actually, maybe more stubborn, it seems, knight g5, but still this is very difficult, this position. This is going into weird territory. Yeah, black's clearly struggling anyway here. Let's not pursue that actually. So bishop a4, trying to avoid losing a piece, but rook d6 with tempo on the queen. Knight g5 attacking white's queen. And actually the queen just budged there, renewing rook takes b6. Now knight f5, again attacking white's queen. Quite an interesting exchange here. But it's here that white decided to take off the queens, basically. A big rook on the 7th. Now knight h5 striking at g7. Knight e6 protecting g7. Again, renewing the pressure on g7, also a7 now. Two pigs on the 7th, as they say. Bishop e8, rook takes a7, hitting the rook. Rook d8, rook f1, protecting at least the first rank for a moment. King g8, knight goes back. It's plunging into that big f5 square, and it can go to d6 and dominate the bishop potentially. King h7, b4, b5, restricting the bishop significantly. Can't use that c6 square now. So now this makes even knight d6 more powerful. So black is resorting to tricks, it seems here. h3, that's just taken. Bishop d7 just offering the bishop, and it's just tricks now, I would say. Rook f5, knight h4, and white finishes off here. I mean, he's so many pawns up now. White's play. Okay, he plays rook takes g7 check. The game ended here. If king takes g7, rook takes g5 check, and rook g3, white's so many pawns up, it's hopeless. Yeah, and if the king doesn't take, then we just snap off this and not worry about anything. Yeah, it's just okay. So very, very interesting opening. A great fresh departure from the Royal Lopez. So that's food for thought for all club players out there to play this system, and maybe consider, if black doesn't protect that pawn, to take and then take on f7. It's a dramatic imbalance game. That's what I absolutely love about chess, that in openings we seem to know there's these like deviations then which lead to dramatic imbalances like this game. So that bishop and knight, which normally we don't consider too much, but it worked out really well here, because that taking out the center pawn on routes, that made it actually worthwhile. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.